I'm Maddie Carter, 28. And for 19 years, I thought working harder would make me visible. It didn't. They celebrated Sierra for every stumble she turned into drama, gave her standing ovations for tears, framed her button art like it belonged in a gallery. Me? Straight A's, National Science Awards, early acceptance to the gifted program. At best, a distracted good job. At worst, forgotten under expired Olive Garden coupons. But the real breaking point? The night I found a $20,000 kitchen remodel with my name on the payment authorization. My silence, cashed in, without my consent, without a thank you. Just a signature forged under family convenience. They thought I'd stay quiet. They thought I'd keep wiring money every time they cried loud enough. They didn't realize I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a creditor. And I had receipts. Before I tell you how I turned their lies into evidence, tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, if you've ever been the forgotten one, until the day they needed your bank account more than your love. The memory returns like clockwork, always quiet, always precise. Sierra's birthday was a parade of squeals, frosting, and velvet ribbons. Mine? A hallway of muffled yawns and a blinking red digital alarm clock. I used to wonder if the house remembered it better than they did. Maybe the creaking floorboard in the hallway whispered, "Happy birthday," when no one else did. That winter, I brought home my first straight A report card, slid it across the table during dinner, heart hammering. Susan barely glanced up from her soup. "Pass the salt," she said, and I did. My fingers trembled. Not from the heat of the bowl, but from the freeze in her voice. Richard nodded absently. "Good job, Mads." And just like that, my achievement dissolved into steam rising from the mashed potatoes. But when Sierra flubbed her piano recital a week later, missed the final chord, burst into tears, Susan launched from her seat like it was Broadway. Her heels clicked down the stage steps like applause, and she wrapped Sierra in this dramatic, trembling hug as if she'd saved the Titanic from sinking. The room clapped with her. That night, I found myself outside, hands in dirt, planting the apple sapling I'd been saving allowance for. Richard stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, and squinted toward the yard. "Nice little thing," he said, then went back inside. The back door clicked shut like a punctuation mark. Sierra peeked out the window, then vanished. Years layered on like coats of paint. Thick, hiding, false. At 14, Sierra entered a county art competition. She glued buttons onto a canvas and called it Chaos Within. Susan had it framed, labeled, and hung in the hallway. At the same time, I got my acceptance letter to the state's gifted science program. They never opened it. I found it 3 weeks later buried under a stack of expired coupons and a takeout menu from Olive Garden. I told myself stories to stay sane, that maybe if I worked harder, they'd blink and see me. So I got up early, stayed late at school, won awards they never asked about. Even my teachers noticed. "Your parents must be so proud." They'd beam. I'd nod and fold the certificates into the bottom of my backpack like secrets. On my 18th birthday, Sierra cried because her Civic was silver, not blue. She wanted the model with the sunroof. Meanwhile, my bed frame creaked beneath me as I stared at the only gift in my room, a blinking alarm clock that had reset itself after a power outage. 12 o'clock? It read. It blinked like a taunt, like a punchline. I didn't say anything. I never did. That was the power of being invisible. You can't disappoint people who pretend you don't exist. But I remembered that summer. The kitchen got redone. Shiny quartz countertops, soft close cabinets, new appliances with blinking displays that worked. I remembered how Susan gushed about the design, how the neighbors came over to admire it. They joked about how generous Sierra's pageant prize money had been. But I knew the truth, or at least part of it, because I saw the envelope arrive. I saw my name. I saw the figure. That night, when everyone was asleep, Sierra humming in her sleep, Susan's heels neatly lined in the hallway closet, I crept into my parents' room. Richard snored like a promise never kept. The drawer in Susan's vanity was locked, but I knew where she kept the spare key. I opened it. Slow, careful. My hands were steady. Inside, underneath a stack of nail salon brochures and expired coupons, was a faded envelope. The paper had yellowed at the edges. I pulled it free, unfolded it once. Twice. Invoice, $20,000, kitchen remodel, payee, Carter family. Authorized by Maddie Carter. I blinked, once, twice. The signature was mine. My silence had a price tag. Apparently, they'd cashed it in. And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was currency. I was collateral. I was done. I thought the house was mine too, until I saw it listed online, with no trace I had ever existed. It started with wine. A second glass poured too fast. Rain slithered down the window panes of my apartment like it had somewhere better to be. I wasn't looking for anything, just scrolling Zillow out of boredom, half-hearted curiosity. Then it hit me like a slap wearing silk gloves. Oakbrook, 4 bedrooms, quartz kitchen, the same apple tree. No, gone. Replaced by petunias. Lovingly maintained by original owners. The description read. Photos glided past, like ghosts. Sierra's old room painted a sterile gray. My bedroom, gone. Turned into an inspirational home office. No medals on the wall. No trace of the girl who used to stare at that same ceiling, wishing for someone to knock. I stared at the screen until the cursor blinked into a seizure. My phone was already ringing before I registered the decision. Susan answered on the second ring. Hello? You sold the house? A pause. Not of shock, but calculation. Oh, that. Yes. Downsizing. It's just the 3 of us now. 3? Not 4. Like I'd been a guest who overstayed her welcome 15 years ago and forgot to return the key. I lived there. She gave a short, chilly laugh. Maddie, don't be dramatic. You moved out ages ago. You never really liked that house anyway. No, I didn't like being ignored in it. Big difference. I'm not having this conversation. Goodbye. Click. I stared at my reflection in the laptop screen. Pale, ponytail too tight, eyes red, not from tears, but from seeing too clearly. I opened Dropbox. Folder, documents, subfolder, adulting. Another, receipts mom would burn. My fingers trembled as I clicked through the layers. There it was. Invoice, remodel, $20,000. My name, my bank routing, my silence. Another document, unsigned NDA, for family harmony. My wine glass was still half full. I emptied it in one gulp. Then the phone vibrated. Again. Mom, 1 unread. She's a robot, no reaction, just wires money. I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before realizing it wasn't for me. A misfire. Meant for someone else? Robot. I had wired money a dozen times over the years. Sierra's student loans, a mold cleanup after Richard forgot to fix the leak. No thanks. No receipts. Just withdrawal alerts and a tighter jaw. I threw the phone onto the couch, let it bounce. But something stopped me from turning it off completely. A thought, or maybe a whisper. Elise. We hadn't spoken in 2 years. She'd sent a message back then, after Sierra's second job interview, miracle. Elise, 2 years ago. If you ever realize Sierra's using more than charm to get ahead, I have receipts. I never replied. I believed in clean slates, fresh starts, not dirty laundry. Now I wasn't so sure. A ping yanked me back to the present. Sierra. Dad collapsed. They won't operate without a $38,000 deposit. Please, Maddie. No preamble. No hello. Just a price tag. For a moment, I didn't breathe. I let the silence answer for me. Then I opened my banking app, typed the number, pressed send, screenshots, email confirmation, BCC'd myself. Twice. Backup folder, offline copy, USB stick. My keys jingled like a dare in my palm. The storm outside had thickened. Lightning forked over the skyline like veins under pale skin. I threw on a jacket, grabbed my bag. My hand hovered over the doorframe before flicking off the lights. Invisibility had always been their gift to me. Tonight, I was driving straight into it. Heart clenched tighter than my steering wheel. "I'm sorry, ma'am. No one named Richard Carter was admitted tonight. Or this week." The words didn't register at first. They landed soft, like feathers soaked in gasoline. "I'm sorry. Could you check again?" My voice cracked. It didn't sound like mine. "Richard Carter, mid-60s, cardiac emergency." The receptionist didn't flinch. Her fingers tapped the keyboard with the same dispassion I'd seen on overworked nurses during residency. "No Carter in trauma. None declined for inability to pay. Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I stared at her. My shoes were soaked through. My hair matted to my forehead. The cold of the rain still clung to me. A second skin. "Yes, I'm sure." She offered a strained smile, the kind people wear when they'd rather not say what they're thinking. I stepped back, heart thudding. The sterile scent of antiseptic scraped down my throat. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar. Voicemail. "Sierra, where the hell are you? I'm at St. Luke's. There's no record of Dad. What's going on?" I hung up. Texted. "Me. I'm here." "There's no one by his name. Is this a joke?" "Nothing." I checked again. Still sent. Still read. Still no reply. For a long moment, I didn't move. I watched a janitor mop near the vending machines. A woman paced by the water fountain, whispering into her phone. The city outside exhaled fog onto the glass doors. I was beginning to feel it. Not panic, not grief. Something sharper. The ping came too fast. "Susan, we did what we had to do." Before I could even react, another message lit the screen. "Susan, you always make us beg." That was it. No shame. No apology, just a punch wrapped in lace. I sat down on the cold metal bench. My hand went to my pocket like muscle memory. Voice memo app. 1 tap. The call from earlier. Sierra's trembling voice, the $38,000 plea. It was all there. Intact. Digital. Indisputable. I pressed play and let it run once, the whole way through. Her sniffles, my silence, the strain in my voice when I finally caved. Robot. That's what Susan had called me. Well, here came the calculation. I opened my email. To dries@lockhartlaw.com. Subject, family emergency body. Attached, audio recording from June 2nd, 2024, 9:14 p.m. Central Standard Time. Urgent review requested. Context, suspected misuse of funds under false medical pretense. Wire transfer confirmation attached. Send. Then I sat. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I stared out the glass doors at the street lamp flickering like a dying firefly. 5 minutes later, the reply came. "Daniel Reese, this isn't family. This is wire fraud." The first lie hurt. The last one clarifies everything. Daniel Reese's email was still open on my phone. This isn't family. This is wire fraud. I'd read it at least 50 times since dawn, and with each repetition, something loosened inside me. Something I'd kept clenched since I was 9. The office was almost silent, save for the ticking of an analog clock on the far wall. Daniel sat across from me, legal pad in hand, every line of his posture like a verdict already drafted. "You have the bank confirmation, the voice recording, the ER's written denial. That's airtight," he said, looking up. "Now we move to intent and pattern." I nodded. "There's more," I said. "Or there will be." That name again surfaced like a buoy in my memory. Elise Monroe, the girl in the pageant photo, the spa co-founder, the one who sent me that cryptic message years ago about Sierra using more than charm. I pulled up my archived chats and found it. Time-stamped. Untouched. Elise, 2 years ago. If you ever realize Sierra's using more than charm to get ahead, I have receipts. At the time, I'd rolled my eyes and muted the thread, but now it pulsed like a signal flare. I need to find someone, I told Daniel, standing. I think she has what we need. The coffee shop Elise chose was all exposed brick and botanical wallpaper. I spotted her near the back. Hair shorter, expression guarded, hands folded too neatly. Thanks for coming, I said, sliding into the seat. Curiosity wins out eventually, she murmured, then glanced up. You look different. You look the same, I replied. Sharp. Tired. She smirked but didn't deny it. I know you reached out once, I began, and I ignored you. I was loyal to people who weren't loyal to me. Yeah, I got that. She sipped her drink. You didn't ask why I messaged you in the first place. I assumed it had something to do with Sierra's spa. It did, and didn't. She leaned in. She used the company account like a personal debit card. Flights, handbags, facials, and Maui. I tried to flag it, but your mom, Susan, was on the board. Nothing stuck. My stomach curled, but I said nothing. I backed everything up, Elise added, just in case. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small labeled flash drive, and placed it between us. This one's titled, If Sierra Burns Me. It has emails, payment records, voice memos. And I still have access to the old CRM. Password is still your sister's high school mascot. Pathetic. My fingers closed around the drive. It was warm, as if it had a pulse. If you take this to court, I'll testify, Elise said, meeting my eyes. Good, I said, standing slowly. I don't want justice in whispers. I want it in public record. Justice doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it wears a power suit and carries email printouts. I adjusted the collar of my blazer for the third time before realizing my hands were steady. Not shaking, not clammy, just certain. The courtroom was sterile in that bureaucratic way. Fluorescent lights humming like a warning, pew-stiff benches, and a single microphone perched like it knew secrets it wasn't ready to tell. Daniel stood beside me, calm as a heart surgeon, legal pad resting like a weapon on the table. Across the aisle, Sierra tugged at the sleeve of her blazer, eyes darting. Susan sat stone-faced, pearls tight around her throat, fingers folded like they were praying. But the prayer had come too late. The bailiff called the session to order. The judge, a woman with gray at her temples and no patience for theater, glanced at the docket. Mr. Reese, proceed. Daniel stepped forward, measured. Your Honor, we submit the following into evidence. He turned to the screen behind the bench. A click, and the courtroom filled with my sister's voice. 2 a.m., June 2nd, 2024. Dad collapsed. They won't operate without a $38,000 deposit. Please, Maddie. Her sobs. My clipped reply. The silence that hung heavier than any verdict. Daniel continued. Exhibit B, wire confirmation. $38,000 transferred from Ms. Maddie Carter's account at 2:11 a.m. A second slide. Exhibit C, a certified document from St. Luke's emergency room. No Richard Carter was admitted. No cardiac emergencies under that name. Silence followed. You could hear Susan's jaw lock. And now, Daniel said smoothly, we call Elise Monroe. Elise walked in wearing confidence like armor. She didn't flinch when sworn in. Her voice carried without shaking. She spoke of account statements, missing funds, misused assets, but it was the emails that cut through. A slide blinked up. From Susan Carter. Subject, contingency. Cry louder. Maddie always folds when she hears panic. Make her think it's life or death. The gallery murmured. Susan's lips twitched. Sierra's hands gripped the edge of her seat. Objection. Overruled. No counter evidence. When Elise stepped down, she glanced at me once. Not seeking approval, just confirming alliance. Then Susan stood, unprompted. Her voice, so tightly wound, cracked on the word daughter. "You're still our daughter, Maddie," she said, eyes shimmering in a way that didn't quite reach human. "None of this changes that." I didn't rise. I didn't blink. "No," I said quietly. "I'm your creditor." The judge nodded once. Her gavel hit wood like thunder with restraint. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff. Full restitution with penalties and interest. Sierra didn't look up. Her mascara bled at the corners, pooling like ink from a lie written too long ago. Daniel leaned closer, voice low. That wasn't just a verdict. That was a verdict with interest. The table was small. 6 seats. No silver trim. No lies. The warmth in the room wasn't just from the oven or the soft light dripping from the pendant lamp above. It was the kind that radiated from laughter, from unpolished kindness, from people who showed up and stayed. There were no place cards with scripted names, just folded notes at each setting, handwritten and creased. "You matter." I watched as Elise ran her fingers over hers, a quiet smile catching at the edge of her mouth. She placed her quinoa salad on the table and unwrapped it with reverence, like it carried more than roasted vegetables. Marcus brought pecan bars he swore he'd baked. Maya rolled her eyes with affection and confessed it was store-bought. Linda, older and always early, hummed as she arranged mismatched plates like a gallery curation. Nothing matched. Everything belonged. There was music, faint jazz, the kind that filled silences without crowding them, and cinnamon, everywhere. It clung to the air like memory. This was not the house I grew up in. This was not the kitchen I paid to renovate, the one that rejected me the way a body rejects a transplant. This was mine. Not perfect, not pristine, but real. After dessert, apple pie my recipe, not from any old tree, we lingered. No one reached for coats or phones. Elise raised her glass first. "To breaking cycles," she said, voice even but eyes soft. "And to not being anyone's backup plan." Glasses clinked like music. A second toast followed, then laughter. I waited, then stood. There was something left in the drawer. It had sat untouched for months, sealed in that indifferent cream envelope, the one with my name in my father's blocky handwriting. I opened it. "I thought strength meant you didn't need us." I was wrong. No signature, no date. Just a single sentence that folded in on itself like regret. No apology. I didn't cry. I walked to the fireplace, lifted the letter, and fed it to the flames. It curled, blackened, and disappeared. Quiet as my voice used to be. When I turned back, the room hadn't changed, but I had. I lifted my glass. "To finding families," I said, pausing to meet every pair of eyes around the table. And finally, full plates. The clink echoed, not loud, just enough. Closure doesn't need applause, just witnesses. I don't remember the exact moment I realized I was unloved, not because it hurt too much to recall, but because it had never really begun. As a child, I believed that silence kept the peace. I thought the reason I wasn't praised was because I wasn't good enough yet. I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, another certificate, another act of kindness, maybe Mom would finally look at me the way she looked at Sierra. But I was wrong. The cost of silence isn't peace, it's erasure. I once wired money to save my father's life, a man I assumed would at least be grateful if I sacrificed for him. But the truth was, he was never at the hospital that night. And the money I sent vanished along with what little faith I had left in the word family. I used to think Elise was just a footnote in Sierra's story, a shadow clinging to the edges, but she kept everything. Copies, invoices, even emails people only write when they think no one's watching. Elise became proof that I wasn't crazy, that the injustice I felt was real. I walked into that courtroom with trembling hands, not because I feared losing the case, but because I feared I would once again be unheard. But this time was different. I had evidence. I had a witness. I had myself. I remember the moment Susan stood up, lips quivering as she called me her daughter. I also remember my answer. Not angry, not emotional, just true. I was no longer a daughter to be manipulated. I was a creditor, a witness, a survivor. When the judge struck the gavel and ruled in my favor, no one clapped. But I heard something else, the sound of an ending, a quiet one, and somehow more powerful because of it. Then came that evening, my tiny kitchen, 6 imperfect chairs, the scent of cinnamon warming the air like a gentle memory. I looked around the table. Elise, Marcus, Maya, Linda. No shared blood, no inherited loyalty. Just people who showed up and stayed. I opened my father's letter. Just one line. No apology, no request, only a fragment of late regret floating in a room already filled with real laughter and actual love. I burned it, not in anger, but because I no longer needed it. There was nothing left to wait for. I had spent most of my life believing silence was safe. But there is nothing more dangerous than letting others define your worth. That night, I raised my glass and said, "To finding families," and finally full plates. I don't know if everyone caught the weight of those words, but no one had to ask. They simply raised their glasses too. And in that soft clink of glass, I knew. I was home. For the first time, I truly belonged. Some betrayals don't leave bruises, they leave voids. Silent, aching voids that echo louder with time. But silence, too, has a threshold. And when truth walks in, it doesn't knock. It turns on the lights. Justice doesn't always come in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives at a dinner table set with love, not guilt. Because when one dares to stand against the tide of manipulation, even whispers of truth can drown a legacy of lies. And perhaps, just perhaps, that is how empires built on silence finally fall. Not with screams, but with someone choosing not to show up anymore. And that is where the silence ends. For years, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That keeping the peace mattered more than keeping my dignity. That wiring money at 2 a.m., ignoring the insults, swallowing the manipulation, was just part of being the responsible one. But what they never realized was this. Silence has a limit. And mine ran out the night I stood alone in that hospital lobby, holding a $38,000 receipt for a father who was never there, for a medical emergency that never happened, for a lie they built, with my money, with my name, and with zero hesitation. They didn't expect me to gather the voice memos. They didn't expect me to archive the emails. They didn't expect me to walk into a courtroom with facts, witnesses, and a legal team. And they sure as hell didn't expect me to win. Because for 19 years, they taught me one thing. That love was conditional. That recognition was rationed. That I had to earn visibility with silence. But now they see me. Not as a sister, not as a daughter, but as the line item they didn't budget for. Consequence. To every single person still watching. Thank you, genuinely, for giving this story your time, your attention, and maybe your own reflection. Because I know some of you. You're sitting in apartments like mine used to be, blinking at the ceiling, wondering why your best is never enough. Some of you are still the family problem solver, the late-night lifeline, the person they only remember when the Wi-Fi bill's overdue or someone needs bail. And some of you, you've been told so many times to be the bigger person that you started thinking shrinking was a virtue. But let me tell you something. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. You don't owe them overdraft fees wrapped in guilt. You don't owe them forgiveness for debts they never intend to repay, financial or emotional. You owe yourself clarity, proof, boundaries. And if you've ever been where I was, standing in a rain-soaked parking lot with a phone full of missed calls from people who only dial when they're desperate, I want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not cruel. You're just done. So if this story hit a nerve, if it cracked something open, if it reminded you of your own unread texts, your own hidden screenshots, Your own stack of someday evidence tucked in a folder no one knows about? Drop a comment below. Tell me, what was the moment you realized they didn't love you? They just loved what you did for them? Or when did you finally stop saying yes just to keep the peace? Your story matters here. Every like, every comment, every view on this video is proof that people like us exist. People who were quiet until we weren't. And if you're new here, or if you've been lurking in silence like I used to, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Because this channel, it's not just about storytelling. It's about naming things no one in your family ever let you say out loud. It's about breaking the cycle without breaking yourself in the process. And trust me, we're just getting started. Next time, we'll talk about what happened when Susan tried to file an injunction against me. Spoiler, she lost that too. Until then, stay sharp, stay steady, and most of all, stay unapologetically seen. Thank you for watching. Thank you for choosing this story. And thank you for giving yourself permission to care. I'll see you in the next one. I'm Camille Wexler, 36. And until this week, I was nothing more than a footnote in the legacy I helped build, the Seraphine. For years, I captained her through storms, paid her fees, kept her seaworthy. And yet, when the family cruise launched, my name was missing. No call, no excuse. Just a group photo on Instagram that said, "Only the real ones on board." They erased me like I was never there. But tomorrow, they'll remember. Before I tell you what happened when I walked onto that ship in full uniform, drop a comment if you've ever been written out of something you built. And subscribe if you know what it means to take back your name, your place, and your truth. I sat at the marble kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a black ceramic mug. No sugar, no milk. Just the bitter simplicity of caffeine and clarity. The sky outside was still ink dark, but the ocean was beginning to show its restless sheen. Miami never slept, but this hour belonged to people like me, the ones who have been written out. The Instagram notification lit up my screen like an insult. Sal Wexler. Wexler Legacy, 2024. Only the real ones on board, the Seraphine family only. I stared at it. A group shot on the dock. The family lined up like royalty at a coronation, dressed in pastels and pearls, smiling with the kind of confidence only inherited wealth and selective amnesia can provide. And there, gleaming behind them in all her immaculate white, the Seraphine. My Seraphine. They posed in front of her as if she were just another yacht. Not the one I'd captained through a Category 3 storm when everyone else had been ready to abandon ship. Not the one I'd navigated for years, negotiated contracts for, paid dock fees on when the family budget ran out. I was the one who kept her name legal, seaworthy, licensed. But not in the captions, not in the guest list, and certainly not in the photos. I should have expected it. A week ago, Graham had called about updates to the operating committee. He'd sounded casual. Too casual. I now knew why. I set the mug down and tapped open my email. Subject: Internal note, Wexler Departure Logistics. From Graham Wexler to Carlton Wexler, Savannah Wexler, legal at Wexler Group. No need to mention Camille. We've simplified the manifest. It's just easier this way. She hasn't been involved in years. I stared at the sentence. Simplified the manifest. As if erasing me was akin to deleting a spreadsheet column. As if legacy could be measured in cell widths. I swiped the email away, my thumb steady. Then, I rose from the stool and walked across the clean, open floor of my apartment. Minimalism wasn't a trend to me. It was armor. No distractions, no fluff. Just function. In the corner stood a tall, steel safe embedded in the wall. I knelt and turned the dial. 27, 13, 19. It clicked open. Inside, my U.S. Coast Guard captain's certification. The original operating contract for the Seraphine, with my name as co-owner and maritime manager. bank statements showing every cent I'd wired to cover fuel, maintenance, staff legal signatures, my initials in blue ink, scans with timestamps. I reached deeper, fingers brushing against cold metal until they found what I needed. My Navy uniform, dark blue, trimmed in silver, tailored to my frame with military precision. I hadn't worn it in over a year, but I'd never stopped being who I was. They had simply stopped seeing it. I carried the uniform to my bedroom and laid it across the bed like ritual. Each fold smoothed with care, each stripe aligned. No emotion in my face, just the quiet movements of someone reclaiming something that was never truly lost, only ignored. On the desk beside the bed sat my leather-bound notebook. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "They erased me. They forgot who signs the departure." Then I underlined it, twice. I didn't need to storm the docks or send warning emails. That wasn't my style.